Hello, sei Charata. The body speaks, so there is body language. Our facial expressions reveal our intentions. The way we walk and move our bodies reveals a lot about our identity. All of this is body language, and because of that, there is an increasing amount of studies on how to use consciously the body language for specific purposes, such as seduction. Next week, we're going to be talking specifically about using body language to do power poses that increase your confidence. But today, our conversation will be specific in the area of sexual attraction. Are there any good postures and facial expressions and body language to increase your chances of attracting someone? Remember that body language is not just what you express, it is also what you can perceive. Therefore, in seduction, in addition to knowing how to transmit signals, you mainly need to become more attentive to capture signals. And more than that, you generally need to become a more interesting person, as this is how body language will communicate with authenticity. To seduce is to be interesting and to understand what the other person wants. The art of seduction has two basic components that we need to understand and internalize. The first is to put attention on ourselves, to develop as a person and become more and more interesting. In order to not be incongruent, it is not enough to just memorize a few lines and movements of what you should be doing. You need to really transform your identity for the better, and the correct body language will naturally happen. The second thing is that you need to observe the other person with empathy and anticipation. You have to know how to read gestures and non-verbal language. There are always clues that anticipate us if we are in the right track. The point is knowing how to detect when there is no chemistry to avoid falling into situations when you are inconvenient or even harassing or just frustrating to the other person. Seduction calls for authenticity. Few things are more attractive than meeting a person who is confident. Being naturally confident generates attraction. You can also use some clever humor. Instead of looking for body language hacks to attract someone, maybe you should choose to develop yourself as a person. That is, instead of wanting to use some tricks to look like an interesting person, maybe you should really become an interesting person. And this is how your body language is transmitted without inconsistencies. In the order of things, you first want to work on yourself to improve your personal development and then be authentic by transmitting this interesting version of yourself. To attract interesting people, be a more interesting person. Now, there are different tricks to make body language more attractive, more confident, more seductive, but you must be congruent, since any inconsistency can be detected and cause the opposite effect of the desired one. For example, when a hunched and insecure man tries to puff up his chest to appear more confident, he may overdo it and gain attention for being a little bit ridiculous. In order for you to properly calibrate the seductive body language in a natural way, you need to practice a lot. Training will help you to truly assimilate that identity that you may not have today of being really an interesting and confident and attractive person. That is what people mean when they say fake it until you make it. You have to pretend it until you get it. I'll give you a quick example of this technique. Imagine that you want to be a surfer, but you still don't know how to catch a wave. Then you start pretending to be a surfer. You get a board, you go to the beach, you dress like a surfer, you spend some time with all the surfers. And specifically, of course, you have to start entering the sea and catch some waves. You keep this until one day there is no more difference between you pretending to be a surfer and being a real surfer. This is what we mean by saying fake it until you make it. There is a real learning. Likewise, you can practice pretending to be an attractive person. But in addition to this practice, there is something that is of enormous value to be done, which is to become a better person. You need to work on your personal development, of course. When your identity is well-rounded and you become a better version of yourself, your body language will naturally reflect that new identity. You'll not need to be calculating what type of body language conveys the greater confidence, because you will naturally be a more confident person whose movements just reveal who you are. Most of the language of seduction is not verbal. To attract someone, you don't need to worry so much about what you're going to say. Some people argue that only a tiny part of the value of a communication is verbal. The main component of communication is body language. It is facial expression. It is tone of voice. That is, you need to be more concerned about how you say it. And most of all, pay attention to the people you interact with. For example, Vanessa Edwards is telling us that most women usually expose their necks when they want to attract someone. When they put their hair back, they may be signaling that unconsciously she wants the man to be smelling her pheromones. They also place their hand close to the suprasternal notch here in this region between the collarbones. Another common seductive female signal is to point the chin down, look up, and blink the eyes. On the other hand, most men generally point their feet in the direction of who they consider to be the most attractive woman in a group. They try to also expand their body area to look bigger, either by puffing their chest or placing their hands on their hips, for example. All of this is body language. It is a way for you to communicate, using your body, what you're interested to communicate, and also to make the other person more open and more interested in getting to know more about you. Communication is a two-way street. Now, one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to seducing someone with these techniques is to be too focused on yourself and then end up forgetting about the other person. This is because most of these movements, they are learned consciously, they're not happening in a natural way. You saw that if you move in a certain way, it becomes more attractive, and then you try to force yourself to be moving in a way to see if it works, and then you're too focused on yourself, and that focusing too much on yourself can end up destroying your goal of connecting with the other person. Communication is not a one-way street. It is not just the signals that you're sending that matter. It is also important to observe the signals emitted by the other person with whom you're interacting. And as you observe the signals and interpret them correctly, then you increase the likelihood that the other person might be interested in you. Empathy is a skill poorly explored in a time of seduction. The best way to pay less attention to what you're doing and start to observe more of what the other person wants is to work on your empathy. It is to understand the emotional dimension of seduction. You need to develop your ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to see the world through that person's eyes, to feel the world through that person's heart, to listen to the words through that person's ears. Then you have to try hard to feel the emotions that the other person is probably feeling and understand their perspective. The real seduction happens in the emotional dimension. You're never going to be able to convince somebody to rationally start to like you. This is a big mistake that many people who consider themselves to be nice people make. They complain that others don't realize how kind and caring and dedicated and interesting and intelligent people they are. But that's not how seduction happens. Nobody keeps making a list of attributes, giving a score, and then thinking, yeah, from my evaluation, it does seem that it makes sense to stop liking that person who's a jerk and starting liking this one who has all the positive attributes of a good companion. It doesn't work like that. The limbic system is related to emotion, is always alert, looking for stimuli that are threatening or can initiate sexual interest. The time it takes to evaluate another person, to make a judgment about the other person, is just like a blink of an eye. It happens in an unconscious level, an emotional way, without even being able to explain what's going on. So when you don't have a good feeling about somebody, they may have emitted body language signals and facial microexpressions that were not positive to the way you perceived it. If you want to interact with someone in a seduction process, you first need to learn to interpret what the other person is feeling, and this has to do with being present, paying attention, and knowing how to empathize. Observe the other person's facial microexpressions. To develop your ability to empathize, you need to observe the person and look for positive signals. In a conversation with another person, observe the facial expressions that serve as a parameter for the subject that is being addressed. That means When you're talking about a specific subject and you find signs of happiness, it does make sense to keep talking about that topic. Facial microexpressions, they always tell us the way forward. Now, you can change your behavior, your verbal communication, and your body language. Then you observe the person's reactions and multiple cycles of always seeking improvement in your interaction. So whenever you change something and you do something that causes a negative reaction, you must realize that and then change your approach. If you do something that is well received, it is a sign that you're going in the right direction. And then you must be constantly on the lookout for these signals to be improving your interaction. It is said that some people are more auditory, some others are more visual, others are more synesthetic. If you're not really sure which is the case with the person you're relating to, it is best to cover all the different possibilities. You can tell them how special they are, you can show them how special they are, and also act how they make you understand that they are so special. Also observe the other person's movements. Evaluate the proxemic communication, the distance between you and the other person. This may indicate the interest. If the other person is approaching you while you speak, the conversation is going well. If the person starts to move away or just cross their arms, you might want to change the subject or the approach. And of all the body language tips, this one is the most important one. You need to learn to touch the other person correctly. And touching correctly means understanding the kinesthetic scale. Neither avoiding touch, nor exaggerating and being unpleasant. Touch is a strong weapon for generating empathy, and it can help the other person to get used to your presence. Observe how often the other person touches you and the region of the touch. Touching a more intimate area like the neck is a much stronger signal than touching other extremities, such as your hand. But of course, all of this can depend according to the context. Observe verbal cues to assess what words the person is using. In addition to assessing the type of informality in the communication, the subject being talked about, also pay attention to the cadence and frequency. Are you talking much more than the other person? Is the other person getting involved in the conversation or not? Your questions are like a job interview. Do you notice that the other person is becoming a little bit uncomfortable? Open-ended questions like what, why, how. They're more interesting than questions that just cause the other person to reply to you saying yes or no. Mirroring is a sign that seduction is happening. There are tips that you need to mirror the other person, imitating the gestures that they make. And this mirroring is called pacing and leading, and some people consider this to be a little bit manipulative. But there is another more valuable modality, which is when mirroring happens as a result of you two being in good sync. As you interact with the other person, you enter the same vibe that is almost like a mirror. It means that you are on the same wave. The idea that you are alike helps a lot, and you keep talking about subjects that are similar, using the same body language, the same tone, and all of this can take a while to happen, so don't rush. In the communication of seduction, small details count a lot, and it is possible to learn. Seduction is much more than just physical beauty. Intelligence and psychology also count a lot. So, it is a discipline available to everyone. The art of seduction is much more effective when you understand that you need to genuinely become a more interesting person and know how to identify what the other person wants. Much of this seduction is done in a non-verbal manner. Your body language represents how you feel. It is your confidence that will make your body language more interesting. First, you've got to become a more interesting person, and so your body language will naturally reveal who you are. If you want to work on this topic and become a genuinely more interesting person, then I invite you to visit the personal development course by visiting arata.se/personal development.